Okay, so today we are going to start studying coordinate geometry. Don't worry too much about the big awkward name, it's actually not that bad. So today I want you to learn three things. I want you to recognize the difference between the x and the y axes. I also want you to learn how to plot points on the Cartesian plane and to give examples of where the Cartesian plane and coordinate geometry is used in everyday life. Don't worry if you don't grasp or understand what I'm talking about at the minute. We'll revisit these learning outcomes at the end of the class to see if you have achieved them. The story of coordinate geometry begins about 400 years ago. A very famous French mathematician called Descartes was in bed one night, but he could not sleep. As he lay there, he started to notice a fly on the ceiling. Now Descartes wondered if he could figure out a way of showing exactly where the fly was on this ceiling. He could not just say to the left, or to the right, or up or down. It wasn't scientific enough for Descartes, who was a great scientist as well. So Descartes decided that if he drew two lines at right angles to one another, he might come up with a way to describe exactly where the fly was on this ceiling. Descartes then decided to place numbers on the bottom row. He called this the x-axis. He also placed numbers on the vertical row, and he called this the y-axis. So now he could finally show exactly where the fly was on the ceiling. Notice that he named the bottom row the x-axis first. Later on, when we're plotting points, we will start with the x-axis and then move on to the y-axis. So just remember this: x comes before y in the alphabet and x comes before y in the Cartesian plane. We call it the Cartesian plane in honour of its creator, René Descartes. Okay, so right about now, you're probably thinking, that's a great story and all, but what's it got to do with me? Well, coordinate geometry is very important to many jobs in the real world. Maybe some of you will use coordinate geometry in your future jobs. For example, it's used by many workers in the construction industry. Think of maybe architects drawing a house, for example. Coordinate geometry also helps air traffic controllers and pilots to land their planes in a safe and efficient manner. However, coordinate geometry is most relevant to you all because of its importance in map making and navigation. You will study maps in second year in geography, if you haven't studied them already, and you will be asked to give coordinates of features on the map, maybe like a forest or a car park or something else like that. Therefore, you should all see why it's important we study coordinate geometry today. Coordinate geometry is also used in other subjects around the school. Think of TG, woodwork or metalwork. Maybe if you were asked to design a project, you'd have to do a drawing for it. But what exactly is the Cartesian plane? Well, personally, I like to think of the Cartesian plane as two number lines that are stuck together. You should all be familiar with what number lines look like by now, and hopefully, for those of you who forget, the image on the screen will help to refresh your memory. Now, it's your turn. I want you to try and fill in the numbers that should go on both the x and the y axis on the screen. Some of the numbers have already been inserted for you, and try your best to fill in the rest of them. Okay, so hopefully your Cartesian plane should look something like the one on the screen right now. Don't worry if it doesn't, you'll get very familiar with these over the next few years. Next, I want you all to take note of some of the key words relating to the Cartesian plane. Firstly, note how the plane is divided into four equal pieces. We call these pieces quadrants, and we'll study these quadrants more in future classes. The next key word I want you to be aware of is the word origin. The origin is the point where the x and the y axes meet. This point is also called 0, 0. But before we go any further, it is important that we learn how to plot points on the plane first. Now, like Descartes, we are going to find exactly where the fly is on the ceiling. So first, we must find where the fly is on the x-axis. Remember, the x-axis is the bottom row, or the horizontal row. We go along the x-axis and find that the fly is above the number 4 on the x-axis. We then move from the x-axis to the y-axis. We move up the y-axis and we see that the fly is to the right of the number 5 on the y-axis. So, to sum this all up, our x value for the fly is 4 and our y value is 5. Therefore, we say that the fly is situated at the point 4, 5. Sometimes though, not all of our numbers will be positive when we are plotting points on the Cartesian plane. But not to worry, we use the same method to find all points on the Cartesian plane. Take the point on the screen, for example. We move along the x-axis first. Remember, x comes before y in the alphabet, and x comes before y on the Cartesian plane. We see that the point is under the number -2 on the x-axis. So again, we move from the x-axis to the y-axis to find the y value of this point. Now we can see that the point is to the left of the number -4 on the y-axis. So therefore, we can call this point -2, -4. -2 is the x value, -4 is the y value. Okay, so this time I'm going to allow you to find the coordinates of the point that is on the screen right now. You have 30 seconds. So hopefully you have now all discovered that the point on the screen is actually the point -4, 2. -4 is the x value and 2 is the y value. Now I'm just going to give you 2 more examples of points on the plane. Sometimes we will find points that are actually on the x or the y axis. So let's look at how to deal with these. The first point we can see up there is the point 2, 0. The point is sitting on the number 2 on the x axis, so the x value is 2. Notice, however, that the point is also to the right of the number 0 on the y-axis, and this is why we call the point 2, 0. Next, I'm going to show you a point sitting on the y-axis. However, we still need to find where the point is on the x-axis first. We can see that the point is directly above 0 on the x-axis, so our x value is 0. The point is sitting on the number 5 on the y-axis, so our point overall is 0, 5. There is only one point that is on both the x and the y-axis, and this is the point 0, 0. Can you remember what we called this earlier? Alright, so this point is called the origin, just in case you've forgotten. And finally, let's sum up all of these studies today. We have learned the difference between the x and the y-axis, hopefully. Secondly, we have learned how to plot points on the Cartesian plane. And finally, we have become aware of the usefulness of coordinate geometry to the real world. You are going to use this Cartesian plane a lot in future maths classes, so I hope you all learned a lot today because it will become very important further down the road. I have attached 2 exercises to the bottom of this video which should help your study. You can choose to draw either a portrait of Bart or Lisa Simpson using coordinate geometry. Note though that the Bart example is slightly easier to draw than Lisa, so I would start with maybe drawing Bart and then move on to Lisa later. So, at last, that's it all for today. Best of luck with your drawings and your future study of coordinate geometry.